The simple things are the hardest to do, in my opinion. Think about this. You talked about sushi, ceviche, tartare, right? Most of these things people aren't making at home. How many people have had pizza? So now everyone's a critic of pizza, right? Oh, I mean, I've had 1,000 pizzas. Like it's harder to make macaroni and cheese for a group of people than it is a beef Wellington. None of these people have made beef Wellington. Hell, most of these people never even had beef Wellington.
Welcome to another episode of Always Learning. Today, our guest is Chef John Hall, who has worked in Michelin-starred restaurants and establishments in the United States and in Europe, has worked in the South, the East, the West. I don't know if he's ever come north. We're in Minnesota, so I don't know. We need to see you, John, coming up here at some point with us to bring some good food, because I feel like we are a food desert. But it is great to have you on today, sir. It was really good to look at your background for a couple of reasons. One, there was a point in my life where I was a prep cook, and and I can remember days where I chopped onions for 8 hours or pineapple for 8 hours. And the whole time that I was doing it, first of all, I got very good with the knife, right? So later in life, when I started having needed dating skills, my skills in the kitchen were pretty good. But my entire time that I used to do that job, my aspiration was not to stay a prep cook. My aspiration was to always go another level and another level up. And it never happened for me for a few reasons, but one of which was no one ever demystified the pathway for me. And I felt like if I didn't go back to school, or if I didn't, do something, that that I just was going to be a prep cook forever. So reading your profile, number one, and just seeing you ascended pretty quickly. I mean, you've been at this for a long time, for a while, but the distance that you went with it, to me, is amazing. Oh, yeah. So can I just ask you from the start, I read that you saw a billboard when you were in high school and you didn't know what you were going to do with your life.
Correct.
You hadn't really come to that decision, but then you saw a culinary school advertisement on a billboard, and somehow something clicked for you. That's what you were going to do.
Yes.
And first of all, is that true? Is that how you discovered that that's the path you wanted to be on?
That is true. I mean, cooking, I was always surrounded by cooking. And I was always cooking. So it was always there. And I think the passion was always there, sort of subconsciously. But it was seeing the sign and then putting together, like, I've been doing that, at home for years. My father, not professionally, but in his own right, was a great cook, and a lot of men in my family. So I was always surrounded by it, and I was always doing it. But in that moment of seeing that, and funny enough, I was in the car with my dad, and it was like, that's it. It just, in that moment, it all came together, but I was already cooking.
So it was a little bit native
at home
to you.
For family.
Yeah, it was native to you. Yes. A little bit. Yeah. Can you quickly just tell me, what's the palate like in Birmingham? You grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I lived in New Orleans coming up. I lived in New Orleans, right? So, I'm a 7th Ward Creole from New Orleans.
Get at it.
Yeah, so
nice.
I know what we cooked, and the men in our family cooked too. But Birmingham, I've only been there twice. What's the palate like in Birmingham?
Southern food, of course, being Birmingham, but a huge barbecue culture. Like, no one does not own a barrel grill, so to speak. And, it's interesting you hear the phrase farm to table, but just about everyone I knew kind of growing up, family-wise, even if it was just a small section of their backyard, they grew something. So, going to the farmer's market and barbecues and, sort of that comfort cooking was just sort of the essential sort of way of life. Sunday dinners were sort of sacred. Everyone gathered around the table. If you didn't eat together any day of the week, or most days of the week, Sunday for sure. Yeah, that sort of slow cooking at times, has a reputation for being heavy, but not always necessarily unhealthy. A lot of vegetables, and of course, a lot of, just keep referring back to the barbecue, a lot of like slow sort of cooking.
So you, at some point, find yourself cooking at a different level. You're not cooking what I would consider to be like home food or comfort food. I know that from having been in kitchens early in my life, I was introduced to a lot of things that I didn't know what they were. I was just told, you're going to make this. You're going to like, I can remember the first time I was told I was going to make calamari. I will never eat calamari. I can remember the first time looking at it and I was like, yeah, this is not for me. Did you have some of those experiences where you had to make a transition from what you knew into this kind of broader world?
Yeah, I think for me, growing up in Birmingham, and of course, Birmingham is sort of like northern central Alabama. So, I mean, we're a bit landlocked, so outside of, catfish or your occasional oyster, you didn't really see that much seafood. And especially depending on, what economic level your family was at, and you didn't know what caviar was or, I remember the first time eating salmon, fillet of salmon, like medium. I was like, what? this is not this is not done all the way. Or, the first time trying, making it in or eating, a tartare.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because growing up, referring back to that slow cooking, which we were just talking about, meat was cooked for a very long time. There really wasn't quick cooking on meat, so the first time seeing, a steak tartare or like a crudo or something like that, just really like, oh, wow, like, okay, there's way more out here than just, slow cooked or long cooked sort of foods. And, that's obviously by kind of a bit, just for upbringing not to go off on a different, path, but just people in the South, and especially, certain communities got cuts of meat that needed a long time to cook for it to be considered done, and we can go into the history of that. But because of that, a lot of people in the South typically aren't used to or strayed away from raw, uncooked or raw foods. So yeah, for me, it was like steak tartare or crudo, or the first time, I had salmon that wasn't cooked, all the way.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, kind of threw me off for a second.
I'm still not there yet. I'm still not there yet. And it's funny that you say that. I never thought about it the way that you just said it, but I can remember growing up, something was always simmering. There was always something simmering. Like there was always the smell of something going.
Exactly.
And it took a long time. I can remember when I first started making red beans and rice, I did them too fast. Like I wanted to get to the end goal, right? But yeah, I look at things like ceviche and tartare and even sushi. My kids eat sushi. I don't eat sushi, right? And I still haven't evolved there yet. Is there a point, in the work that you're doing, is there a point at which you are saying, I'm out of my depth here? Like you're thrown into a situation or into a kitchen or into a place where you've got to get over it. You got to get over feeling like you're out of your depth.
Oof. Am I naming a place in particular, or just an experience?
Yeah, in your life, in your trajectory.
In the trajectory where it's like, man, this is like very tough.
Yeah.
I would have to say working at Per Se was it. It was, just a little bit of background. Thomas Keller is probably the most decorated, awarded American chef in the history of our country. I guess you could put that as of right now. So, and everyone who came there at their previous job, they were like the best of the best at their previous job.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, it's sort of like this assembly of an all-star team of restaurants, and not just of New York, from arguably around the world. And we get there, and everyone is quickly humbled because these guys who are above us, the sous chefs and the chefs, I mean, I say now, I look back at that time some of the cooks, I mean, all of us now are doing extremely interesting things maybe not the most popular, right? You won't see us on the Food Network. And that's a whole nother conversation. But technically sound, arguably the best chefs in the world. Arguably. I know people, if they got off the plane in Minnesota, they arguably would be the best chef in your whole state. So it was a humbling experience because we were so good at where we're at, and then we get there, and these guys who are above us are, our mentors, our sous chefs, our chefs de cuisines. They were unbelievable, unbelievably talented. And it gave you another level of like perspective of, oh wow, like there's a higher plateau, there was a motto that would be on the walls, and it's on the walls of all of these restaurants, or a mantra that we would say, there's no such thing as perfection, just the pursuit of it. Meaning like, wow. there's nothing that we do is perfect. We're always pursuing perfection. And if you have that sort of mentality, you never get complacent. You never get, egotistical. You're always striving.
So how does
that experience? Yeah.
How do you get there? Like, we started with your origin. You're in Birmingham. How do you end up in one of the world's best restaurants in New York? And I'm looking at the other things that Keller owns. Keller also owns French Laundry, yes. which we always hear about. Ad Hoc in Napa Valley, which you always hear about. Yes. Buchan, I've never heard about that, but it's also Napa Valley. Places in Vegas, LA. How do you end up in per se in New York?
How far back? I mean, just in general, or you want me to tell you?
Yeah, the pathway there, because it feels like an achievement to be in there.
It is. I think most of us, when I went to New York City, and this is coming fresh off the heels from working in a Michelin-starred restaurant in Luxembourg for a restaurant, the Elixir. So she won this coveted award called the Bocuse d'Or in 1989. I think the only woman since then to have ever won the Bocuse d'Or. But to get there, most of us took the path less traveled. So you're working at great caliber restaurants that will keep giving you the skills to maybe be able to be there. So for me, that was always working at the best. To arguably, that restaurant was the best. So to be there, like, I need to sort of prepare myself for that. So that I was working for French chefs, French restaurants, getting technically sound in that. So like I said, I worked in Luxembourg in Europe for the one who won the Bocuse d'Or. And before that, I worked at Gramercy Tavern in New York City, which the opening chef of Per Se was an alum of Gramercy Tavern. So that helped because they could see that the pedigree of the path I had chosen to get there was sort of in an alignment of people who had been there before.
And for people that don't know what goes on in the kitchen, they don't know what being a chef is about, but there's an interest there. They're on the outside. They're kind of like a civilian, and they're thinking about this. What would you say in terms of how much of this is your ability to be able to practice and learn and effort makes the difference, and how much of it is like just raw talent? And like, I could go shoot 1,000 times if I want to. I'm never going to become Michael Jordan, right? There's some sort of gift there. How much of this is the artistic gift, and how much of it would you say is if you put in the time and the effort and the practice, you're just going to become good?
Man, that's a great question. That's a really good question. I feel like I've done interviews before. I've never been asked that. I would say I'm going to go maybe like 80-20. 80 of just you do it 1,000 times. And there are some, and in my career, I have seen maybe 20% of people who are just, you were put on this earth to be an amazing chef. Like There's a guy I know, Daniel. He runs one of the top restaurants, not only of Tokyo but of the world. And we work together per se. And even in that group of all stars, like he was Jeter. You know, like oh, like we're like the group of all stars. You know, like, hey, there's Barkley over there, but he's Jordan. You know, so like even amongst extremely talented people, some people you meet, you're just like you were touched to do this. But you know, even as right now, I'm training one of the staff members, Tony, how to do pasta. And it's like, you know, she's doing pasta, she's getting it. It's pretty good. After she's made a million of them, will they be better? Of course. You know, you break down a chicken. The first chicken you break down, you broke it down, it may take you 20 minutes. Now you can break down maybe like 6 chickens in 20 minutes. And they're better than the first one you did. You know, so for sure it's repetition. You know, even, you know, like you said, using a sports reference, these guys, they still warm up. They still shoot 1,000 shots a day. Or, you know, they still, you know, you see a quarterback warming up. What's he doing? He's still throwing the ball. How many times has he thrown that ball? Like more than 1,000,000 times. So, and I do believe in that sort of 10,000 hour rule to master, you know, specific crafts and tools. I do believe you need at least 10,000 hours dedicated to a specific focus.
Wow. 10,000 hours. That's a lot. Wow.
It's a lot. I mean, it's years, but you think of the people who are extremely good at what they do. All of them have probably done the 10,000 hour rule. And I feel like in the current day and age we live in, we're losing that. You know, I saw on one podcast, a gentleman, he was at the Navy SEAL. He's like, this is the easiest time in history to ever be great. Because we're also complacent and we don't want to dedicate 10,000 hours towards a particular focus.
That's a great thing to say. Like, you know, things have fallen to mediocrity so much that if you're excellent,
the bar's in hell.
Yeah. Wow.
So the bar's in hell now. I mean, honestly, you know, to take it to another place, a lot of people left our industry during COVID, right? And for so many different reasons. And while it's been a dark time for our industry, I feel like it's also a good time because the people who don't want to do it anymore, who aren't dedicated, if you don't want to do, please go find something else to do, you know? And for the people who are dedicated, the people who have always, you know, bust their hump to get where they are, like, this is a good time for the people who are grinders, for the people who are dedicated, for the people who are committed, to the people who are like focused and, you know, want to see things through. Because also compared to the people you're standing next to, I mean, you will look like Michael Jordan. You're John Paxson. That's for the old people who knew the early Bulls. For people who knew the early Bulls, yeah. So yeah.
You know, watching this is a off the field type of reference, but watching the special on Kanye that's on Netflix a while back, I didn't know all of his story and his track record, but I found it interesting that there was a period of time where he couldn't even get 5 minutes in the record label that he was working in. He was doing beats, he was producing, whatever, but he kept trying to get time to show people his rhymes or whatever. And of course, you know, you've got this dude who largely is considered to be a genius, can't get 5 minutes with the A&R people where they're not talking on the phone while he's trying to, you know, show them his stuff. And look at him now, right? You know, he changes the whole game. Is there a point where you're in the top spot in a place like Per Se or somewhere else where you feel like, man, for me to really get a Grammy, I need to go pursue my own vision. I need to be let loose from this.
Yes, and not necessarily the pursuit of like an award, but just knowing that it can be done or I can do it. I think for me, I was working for Dave Chang at Mamafuku Sambar in New York. I was a sous chef there, and still keep in touch with Dave to this day. But like, so Dave, he's traveling. I mean, he's on top of the world right now. He's doing it, and I'm like, I mean, if Dave can do this, I mean, I could do it. And I knew. And look, different people, especially in our industry, feel they have different view paths on how to get there. Some people feel they need to stay with someone for a decade or so. And then maybe like they'll get put on or seen, or, an investor will come along. But no, I knew I working for him, I saw like how he viewed the business, the industry, his vision. I would say this too, probably arguably maybe not the greatest chef that I worked for. And that's still good because I worked for a lot of great chefs. But for his branding, marketing, there's no one even close. And so I picked up on those little nuances and cues. Like, he read every email. He came in, he touched people, he talked to folks, like, just saw how he moved, kind of gave me that, like, well, I know if I want to get maybe not even to that level, but just to do my own thing, one, I knew it was possible. And I sort of picked that up from being there.
So you had confidence when you decided, because eventually you open your own restaurants, right? You
Yes.
do your own thing. And you had confidence that your business skills, along with your culinary skills, would be there. Like, you would be able to handle the business of it.
Yes. And now this is for other people who are out there who want to be chefs, or any artists for that particular matter. The art is great, and the art is your passion. But if you do not have the business knowledge or savvy, you will be taken for a ride every day. And I mean, and that's not a ride is being like not a fun ride, If you do not have the business sense, if you do not know labor, food costs, percentage of sales, I mean, if you do not learn the business side, you may not even be able to be an artist. And I think that may take some time for people to get. If you do not handle the business, you cannot be an artist, or someone will handle the business side for you. But is it always in your best interest, or do you know enough of what's going on? So many times we see these situations where a chef may have won his James Beard Award. Half a year later, they're out of work. Or like, the investors are the people who know the business side, fired you. I'll let you go. Like, you can make a great souffle. Do you know how to manage the books? And we saw this a lot during COVID. The chefs who are jet setting, they're getting a nice 6-figure salary for being who they are. But when it's time, when we have to cut staff, or staff cannot come in, the staff can't work because of COVID and different things, or people quit, or the Great Resignation. One, can you run a service anymore because you've just been this celebrity jet setting chef for all these years? Do you know the nuances of the kitchen anymore? Do you know the business aspect? Do you know how the invoice has been paid? How the tax has been paid? Or the license is renewed? So I went to culinary school for 2 years. Now, Johnson & Wales, funny enough, I'm wearing a Johnson & Wales hoodie. We won't get into too much time because now unless they want to erase whatever student loans I still owe them. But anyway, shout out to Johnson & Wales. But they had you could get 2 degrees in 4 years. You could get a culinary degree, an associate's in culinary, and then you could get a business management degree. That's what I chose to do. Some people got a associate's degree in culinary and then got a bachelor's degree in culinary. There's not that much they're going to teach you that much more in the last 2 years. So great. So now you have these 2 degrees in culinary and you still don't know payroll. how's that going to work out? Especially if you're trying to like work for yourself. I went to business school. I have a bachelor's degree in business and hospitality management just to keep myself a bit well-rounded. And there was always entrepreneur fire in me. And I knew that was a critical part of me having that um, to be able to even be where I'm at today. Because I do think without that, I'm not here. Or if I'm here on someone else's dime. And just to add to that, it's one thing I'm very proud of is that I've always remained 100% independent.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no Daddy Warbucks with a blank check, and that's another aspect of this business too that we can get into that later. That the artists, they just remain artists. So then you have someone who recognizes your talent and lets you buy whatever, do whatever you want to. But at the end of the day, like, they'll give you the title chef owner. And sure, like you can own 10% of something and sure, technically you're owner, but who's actually controlling, the things behind the scene? And that is one big one for our industry that never gets talked about in interviews. All these people you guys see on TV, all of these people with these, sure, do they own some of it? They own a piece. Somebody else controls everything that you see.
It's so funny.
And essentially controls them.
The analog to the music business is very, I think, similar to that, in that you have people that just want to be the artist. They don't want to have to know all the business ins and outs, whatever it is, but they get robbed.
And I will put that out there. And I will put that out there. I'll put that out there. You can just be an artist. Like people, I don't want those responsibilities. Great. You don't have to have those responsibilities. Someone else can have them, but just understand that there is a sacrifice and there is a price that you are paying to just be the artist. Just know that.
Yeah. And it's interesting for you because you had to be very confident because, the way that I read this as an outsider, the number of businesses that fail, the number of restaurants that fail is probably higher than anything I've seen anywhere else. Like the odds are stacked against you. If you're going to open up a restaurant, the odds are not really with you, period.
They're not with you.
They're not with you at all. And then, in looking up I looked up what were some of the most common reasons for restaurants not to succeed. Not enough operating capital, poor management team, poor location, failing to research the competition, ineffective menu pricing, inconsistent quality, high staff turnover, accounting mistakes, failing to adapt, not enough industry experience. Like the list is long. And I'm like, you got to remember all this stuff. Insufficient marketing, forgettable food, poor resource management. Man, you got to remember all of that.
It is a lot. Funny thing is nowadays, when I'm in the kitchen and when I get to just cooking, that's the fun part now. That's the fun part because I am thinking, payroll, books, inventory, marketing, competition, location, inflation. And this kind of goes back to the beginning of the conversation where it was like, I went to go work for the best people. I wanted to be part of the best or be able to be sustainable and be around. So I didn't go work for mediocre restaurants or establishments. Like, I'm going to go learn from the best. I'm going to go work for the best. I'm going to go to one of the best culinary schools. When I'm applying for restaurants, if I'm in New York, I'm going to work at the best restaurants in New York City, period. So I can be here XYZ amount of years later and have this conversation with you.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit about, you have all those business skills, you have the culinary skills, and you decide to open your own place. So you open up Post Office Pies in Birmingham. I want to know what goes into you deciding, like when you decide you're going to open up your own place, what's the menu going to be? What type of food it is you're going to make? You could have went a million different directions with that.
A million.
So how do you land on Post Office Pies?
So Post Office Pies came born out of an apartment in Brooklyn, in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. which funny enough, right down the street is it's a pizzeria called Lucali's, which is like Jay-Z and Beyonce's one of their favorite pizzerias, famous pizzeria now. I was down the street. So in between jobs in New York, me and my girlfriend at the time had this crazy idea of like, oh, there's no late night food in this area of Brooklyn. Oh, and again, the entrepreneur spirit and sort of business savvy. All right, well, I'm going to create a pizza business out of the apartment. And it was called Insomnia Pizza. And it was called Insomnia Pizza. And at the time I was still working and I was about to transition to Mamafuku. So when I would get off at the job I had then, it was a place called Diner in Williamsburg. I would get home about 10. Google had it to where you can add a different account to your phone number. I'm not sure if you still could do that, but so I could add a number to my phone number, which was the number you called to order the pizzas. And I received calls, made the pizzas, and I delivered them on a bike in a certain radius in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. Fast forward to Birmingham. I get to go back home maybe like once a year from New York, just because it's a tough, demanding schedule. I'm working at tough, demanding places. A good friend of mine, Brandon Kane, he was in the fine dining world. He left. He started barbecue. Next door to his barbecue restaurant was an old post office. So on this block, there's a brewery, the empty post office that the brewery owns. They're storing kegs in there, and then you have the barbecue. Now, I'm living in Brooklyn. Everyone knows New York is known for pizza. There's pizza everywhere. Every neighborhood has its own pizzeria. Okay, they've got barbecue. They've got beer. I'm not going to like slap a fine dining restaurant in the middle of there and hope for the best. Again, this is where people's ego and lack of doing research of market and what communities need. This is what some people do, and especially when it's not their money. No, pizza would fit perfectly with beer and barbecue on the same block. I've already been doing Insomnia Pizza out of my apartment in Brooklyn before I moved down here. And what better way to sort of reintroduce myself back to a community who might not have known me to be cooking before I left? Because I graduated high school at 17. I left Birmingham at 17. So,
Wow.
I was never professionally cooking there. I came back and I did a couple of stints cooking for some restaurants there. Summers off from college and whatnot. But on my own, I'm like, well, everyone knows pizza. It's an easy way for me to reintroduce myself to, one, the food community here and just the community in general. And second, the overhead. Again, here comes the business. The overhead cost is low. With pizza, I don't need linen. I don't need expensive wine glasses. I don't need, a sommelier. We don't have to have an extensive wine list. There's not fine china, fine silverware. All of these things that go into these high-end restaurants that you need to just start off. Starting capital is another thing that we mentioned. I can come in, start a pizza. I already have the recipes, the idea, and the level of entry financially is low. And because it's pizza, it's a high return. And there's sort of like the birth of post office bars.
I've always felt like it's very interesting to me that if you can go back to doing something simple, but just do it better than everybody else, that's a good business plan, right?
It's a good business plan, but I will say this, especially when it comes in the terms of food, the simple things are the hardest to do, in my opinion. And I will say that, but think about this. You talked about sushi, ceviche, tartare, right? Most of these things people aren't making at home. How many people have had pizza? So now everyone's a critic of pizza, right? Oh, I mean, I've had 1,000 pizzas. Like it's harder to make macaroni and cheese for a group of people than it is a beef Wellington. None of these people have made beef Wellington at home. Hell, most of these people never even had beef Wellington. How many of these folks have had mac and cheese? So everyone's an expert on mac and cheese. Everybody's an expert on hamburgers, right? You could tell me, I know where you are right now. People don't even know what a Juicy Lucy is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, but everyone can try to make one because it's something that is this common. So I do feel the common things are always the hardest to make. I feel it's easier doing this cooking than it's making pizzas at the restaurant we have now because everyone's had pizza, and pizza is so easily accessible.
I looked at your menu though. It doesn't. Not everybody has what you have on your menu.
Everyone's done, so
like your
so
menu's
that
got
gives you a
like
bit
some
of
good
leeway.
pizzas.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got, and you
Oh
know what?
yeah.
Your prices are reasonable. That's one thing that I'm kind of considering here is like, wow, you're not only doing a good thing, and you've got this nice menu, but it's reasonable too in
Yeah,
terms
you're
of
talking
this.
about the pizza restaurant or the
Yeah,
new restaurant?
yeah. Well, the pizza restaurant. I know your newer
The
restaurant was
pizza
tough in
restaurant.
this. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and listen, prices at the pizza shop could and should always be higher. And again, this is another business thing. What people do not know and what they don't tell you is that your taxes increase by 3% every single year without fail. And any commercial lease that you sign, or just in general, your taxes go up by 3%. So technically, we should be increasing our prices. And this is for all business people out there. You should be increasing your prices by 3% every year. Now, what you don't know or don't see is that the bigger brands, they do it, but you don't. It's not as noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, also, they have better buying power on other products because there is a million McDonald's. So you may not notice the increases here and there because they can cut prices on different things because they can bulk buy. But again, this
Well,
is just the
people are
business
starting to
of it.
notice it even at McDonald's
Oh,
now.
they're noticing it now.
There's a lot of
They're
talk.
noticing it now.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that the normal consumer does not know that. The normal consumer does not know every time you swipe your credit card, there is a credit card processing fee. So it's actually cheaper to take cash. It's easier, it's better for the business. But the consumer doesn't. Like it's all these things. But I'm
So
sorry.
it's interesting that you took the path of learning the culinary part of things. You got a degree in the business side of things, which to me seems like the perfect kind of matchup. Like if you wanted to put together a good education program, having both sides of those things sounds like it served you well. What did your K-12 experience do for you? Did it set you up for any of that? Is there anything that you use in your day-to-day skills now that you can trace back to having been in school for 13 years before you went to college?
This is a very quick question. Man, I mean, you've got some phenomenal questions. Honestly, and a lot of this came afterwards too, but K through 12, I mean, there's something sure. Like I had always loved history. So knowing like the knowledge of things. So like I learned like history things about in culinary because I had loved history. Math. Like I'm not using calculus or, too much algebra these days, but like it's the interesting thing you talked about kids not learning that much. One of my wife's friends, kids does not know how to tell time. That's not a digital clock. And we learned that in school, and I was thinking like, oh, I mean, like everyone knows it. So like, you know, who doesn't know that? I mean, people didn't not know that. But honestly, people skills was probably one of the most. I can't think of in college. It was probability was the class specifically probability and statistics in college, but in high school, I mean English. Maybe with grammar, but honestly, it was people skills.
Your ability just to be social and to get along with others.
To get along with others, knowing that the same approach doesn't work with everyone, but certain approaches do, and understanding how to reach different people to get them on the same level in different ways.
Well, listen, I want to ask you a couple of questions since I got you as an expert here that are just selfish questions. This is for me because just I want to
Oh my
know.
God.
There's some
Okay.
stuff I just want to know. There's some things I
Yeah,
just want
fire
to know.
away.
So the first one is, how is the industry when it comes to racial diversity and cultural competence? So, like, if I'm thinking about, we're always thinking about how we can get kids of color, marginalized community, people from marginalized communities into places where they wouldn't normally get into. And you have gone a long distance. So, but when you get there, how culturally competent is the industry, and how are they on diversity?
I mean, people would argue me, I would say low and bad. Now, I mean, people are obviously a lot more aware and conscious these days than previous, but at the end of the day, it's a business. And I think you and I know this, that for the most part, I mean, business does not care about your feelings. Business doesn't care what you look like.
Yeah.
They don't care that much. I mean, let's just cut the shit. Like, they do not care. They care for marketing and branding, which again goes back to business. Like, how many Juneteenth things that we see now? How many, LGBTQ things that we see now? Like, they do that because the sales equal that. Now, unless you're Bud Light, that was a mishap. They read that wrong, but but no, and I would say this. I'm not going to say that everyone doesn't, but overall, and I'll give you a perfect example. 2020, 21, social injustice, George Floyd, social injustice is happening. And at the time, I'm still in Birmingham. And people who have won countless awards, the highest of the highest awards, some of whom I've had worked for, and who have greatly benefited off of people of color. There was a moment that these folks could have came out and stood up for community and, said, we stand with the Black and brown community. These folks did not do that. Why? Because they probably knew that maybe their base is sort of centered around people who do not care. Or they maybe feel like it will hurt their image. But, you've achieved to some degree everything there is to achieve. And you could do this and show a bit of solidarity amongst the people who have helped you get to where you've gotten. These people chose not to do so.
So it's,
that was a very turning point for me, specifically for people who I knew. Like, okay, you don't care. And, and so now, they don't care. I mean, again, there are people who care, but overall, the color they care about is green. So,
So, I mean,
I'm sorry, it's a hard truth.
No. And I feel like that would be the same. I feel like that would be the same answer in a lot of industries. That would be the same answer, I think, yeah.
And the people that that you see on TV who are Black and brown, behind closed doors, they would say the same thing to you. On an interview, they would not say that. And I personally know people who you guys see on TV all the time. And it's sort of been my bone to pick with folks because I feel like it is very misleading for the youth and for the people who are coming up behind us, because you do not have to be on TV. You don't have to do the song and dance. I got a guy, he right now is maybe on 4 shows on the Food Network. How many has he executive produced? 0. And when the next handsome, tall, good-looking brother comes along and you're old, you will be out the door.
And it sounds like The best advice then in that case for our young people is be so good that they can't ignore you. Just do a job. Be good. Just be good at what you
the
do.
resume, the working at the schooling, the working at the places I worked at was so I don't care if I came off with spaceship and I was green and I was a Martian. You cannot deny this in front of you. There's nothing there. I don't care what I look like. There's nothing that you can say that you'd be like, well, he's not qualified or he's not worthy of this job. Make yourself to where like no one can deny you. And I think that's the best advice I would give the people. And 1,000 clicks on social does not equal $1,000. I think that's a big thing that is very misleading that I would say to the people right now. I own multiple restaurants, multiple homes, and you will not see me on TV.
Yeah, I think our young people are so enamored, I think, now with the flash of things, and
the flash,
and they don't see the work behind the flash for one. You get to see the outcome, but you don't always get to see the work that gets you the outcome for one. And then two, there's a lot of there's a lot of passive millionaires in the United States. There's people that walking around with Target clothes on, with boats and houses and stuff.
Oh,
but there's no flash.
There's no flash. I was in New York. I was leaving Gramercy Tavern. I just got off to work. And I walked past this gentleman. I said, damn, that looks like Ted Turner. And the next day I came in, they were like, oh yeah, Ted Turner. I came in at Gramercy. Now, unless you know what Ted Turner looks like, which probably most people don't or didn't, this man is a multi-billionaire I just walked past.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're in New York and, most people are kind of walking, not driving, you also can't associate with someone's wealth by what they drive, what sort of car they pull up in. He pulls up in a Toyota or a Maybach, someone pulls up in a Maybach, you think, oh, okay, well, this person's wealthy. I walked past this man. So, it's the same thing with, think about, I don't know, the Super Bowl coming up. Who's going to be wealthier? The quarterback who wins the Super Bowl or his agent who also represents 50 other people who gets a cut of everything they make and no one hits him?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know what Pat Mahomes' agent looks like, but Pat Mahomes' agent is probably richer than Patrick Mahomes. So that's the thing I would tell our folks, be the agent. You don't always just try to be the quarterback, or the guy with the pads. Own a sports agency, go into sports medicine. There's so many different paths, just besides the ones that we think.
And those aren't the ones that are on TV. They're not on TV. They're behind the scenes. Quiet money is the best money. Quiet money is the best money.
Let me tell you, I don't want to be bothered.
Yeah. I
don't want to be bothered at the grocery store. And this is another reason, I don't want to be famous. Like, a buddy of mine, same guy on Food Network, we were hanging out a couple of months ago. It's 3:00 in the morning. We're in a hotel lobby. We're having drinks, hotel lobby, just catching up. We haven't seen each other in years. Now, a woman comes through the hotel lobby with a man, loses her mind because she sees him, right? It's 3:00 in the morning. I'm saying to myself, all right, this is an adult show. Fuck that. Hell no. How is this fun? This cannot be fun. And this is 3:00 in the morning. Get alone. You cannot go to the mall with your kid. That's not fun. How is that? Unless you just, your ego is just huge. How? That's not okay.
And that's what some people want, I think, actually. But our young people, I think the best thing that we could do for our young people is to demystify what's behind the scenes and the road there, and let them decide after that. Listen, if you want to put in the work to get that type of notoriety, fine, but let me show you what the work is to get there.
Yes.
So now 2 more questions for you, just because I want to know, and I got an expert.
Feel free.
I got an expert.
Ask me anything.
So there's an influencer that I follow on YouTube, And one of his YouTube videos that he did, his parents had come to visit him in France, and he got them reservations at the restaurant that's at the top of the Eiffel Tower. And
Okay.
he made a big deal about it. He was like, you don't get reservations at this restaurant, and blah blah blah, and all these things, right? So I'm like, okay, well, this will be take me with you. I want to see what this looks like. So he takes his parents there, and it is a very big deal. But they bring him like 15 different things. It's not like one plate of things, right? Like it's one thing, then another thing, and then another thing. And each thing was a work of art. Like looking at the plate. And I remember thinking to myself, this is very expensive. This is a world I would never be in. All of that stuff looks like a work of art on that plate. And if you brought me another plate with some andouille sausage and some cheesy grits, I'd probably eat that first, right? So is that stuff good? Right. Is that stuff even good? The little artistic looking things with the sauce and a little sprig of something on it. Is it even good?
I will say this. There are restaurants that you and I could go and have 10, 12 tasting course dinner, and you will walk away and be like, this is the most unbelievable meal of my life. They do exist, and some of them are worth it. Now, with that being said, there are places that are just terrible. And because there's so sort of like tweezers and all the things, your food's never hot. I'm sorry, I like hot food.
Right.
If the food's supposed to be hot, I like it hot. Most of these restaurants, you're not ever eating hot food.
And there's not much of it either. The plate is empty.
And there's not much of it. And there's not much of it. Yeah. But yeah, there are some places that actually are worth the trip. There are some places that are worth the money and the hassle, the reservation. They do exist. They're small.
Yeah. I feel like I have a very working class palate and always have, which brings me to my last question around all of this, because I travel a lot. I go across the country, and I swear wherever I go, whether I'm in a city or far away from a city, I will find a Chinese restaurant. Most places I go, I will find a Mexican restaurant. Most places I go, I will find an Italian restaurant. What I won't always find is a soul food restaurant or a Black restaurant. I will find Chinese, Mexican, Italian in most every city, almost everywhere I go. Yes. If I want to eat those three things, they've become staples in the United States diet. And to some degree, Southern food has become a staple in the diet, but not necessarily. It's almost like we owned jazz at one point, and after Kenny G, somebody else owns jazz now, right? Like we owned hip hop at one point, right? Now somebody else owns hip hop, right? We owned soul food and Southern food at some point, and now the Cracker Barrel is the massive producer of that. Why do we not have a national system of soul food restaurants and Black restaurants?
It's the same reason we don't have Black banks, Black hospitals, Black schools ran by Black people, Black car companies. Certain communities, they knew when they came here, this will be one of our paths to economic success, right? Asian Americans, they come over. We are going to do nails, and we're going to run these restaurants. This is what we're going to do now, and also that afterwards. But because of doing this, then our kids may not necessarily have to do this if they don't want to. Our kids can go into tech. Kids can be engineers, but came with a specific focus. A specific focus. We are good at this. This is exclusive to our community. We know this, and hell, we don't even have to give them the real thing. Like most Chinese you eat, people are eating like sesame chicken. You're not ordering off the menu like there's a place I'll go. Like she will give me the menu that she doesn't give Americans, that has like a pig stomach and other things on there that people would feel like, oh, well, that's not what I want to eat, or that doesn't sound appetizing. But like certain communities that came over with a specific focus on a clear path of like, we're good at this. This is what we do. This is ours. We're going to embrace it. and we're going to put it out there for the masses.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've done that. We haven't done that. And the things that we have done that with are things that we talked about earlier, which aren't necessarily conducive to longevity sort of industries or careers, which are like football or sports. We're great at those. You know, we're great at being the quarterback. Are you good at accounting? You know, are these other things? Hey, you can run fast. You're gonna run fast your whole life?
Mm-hmm.
I can open up this restaurant, and if we have a specific type focus, if we, know we're opening in a market that is not that doesn't have that, you can sort of build these things, but it doesn't always look sexy. And I think other communities have, like I said, screw what sexy looks like. We're going to go with what we know and what's going to make us money. And our community just hasn't done that.
So my major takeaway
I think that's sort of like the long and short of it.
And it's a great answer. I mean, I think this is what people need to hear. I think, so some of my takeaways from our conversation today, number one, do the work and learn the trade. Number two, learn from the best. Don't shoot for the ankles. Go to the top. Try and get to the top and learn from those people, because the lessons that you will learn will make you much better whatever you do after that.
Exactly.
And have your excellence go beyond whatever color you are. Just be excellent. Know what excellent is. Like, see it, go look for it, find it, see it, then know it, internalize it. And the final thing that I take away from all this is the most important part that I get from your story is, find a path to owning yourself, right? Like you don't be the franchise, be the franchisee, right? Or the person who owns, the person who owns the franchises, that's the goal. The goal isn't to integrate and work for somebody else necessarily,
And again, and everyone's path meant that, ownership, at least to some degree, may not be everyone's path. But just you should know the options out there. And can I add something for the artist?
Absolutely.
I would say use your artistry as a leverage to the things that you are not good at. So, for instance, if you are a great cook, but man, I don't know much about the business, but I do know this one guy who comes in who's an attorney. Hey, how about I cook for you once a month or twice a month, and you give me XYZ amount of hours of legal service? Hey, you're a CPA. I don't know anything about managing books. I know if my books aren't good, my business is not going to run. How about I cook dinner for you and your fiance? And then in exchange, maybe you give me a couple of hours of accounting services. Hey, you're in real estate. Let's leverage your talent, what you're good at the things that you're not good at. Through cooking, I learned about real estate. Through cooking for other people, I learned about real estate and all the nuances of that. And now I am a owner of multiple properties. Not because I didn't go to school to become a real estate or a real estate agent or those things, but while doing what I was good at, one, put me around folks who were good at other things too. And that's the thing that we don't talk about. Like, don't be a good chef or a good cook for the sake of being a good cook and then miss out on conversations about real estate, for example, or investments. Hey, I kind of overheard you talking about, like, hey, would you mind give me an hour of your time for exchange for like lunch? Lunch is on me. Can you give me an hour of your time on this other day to just help me, give me a little bit more knowledge about something that I don't know about that's going to be beneficial to me in my career, or not even my career, but just me as a person later on in life.
I love that. I mean, I think if you have an access point to meet people that know more than you do, like, if you have a kitchen cabinet of folks that know
Yes.
their trade, but you need an access point, being able to say, I'm a chef. I'm a Michelin level chef and I can cook for you and your fiance. I think that's a pretty big access point.
You have to think about this too. Just about most careers, people have to eat. Not only people want to eat, you can have a hot dog, you have caviar. You cannot go a certain amount of time without eating or drinking water, or you will die. Mm-hmm. This is an essential. Now, it's not essential for people to go out to dinner, to go out for dinner, but you have to eat. Like, you will eat within 24 to 40 hours of this conversation. You will. It's undeniable. You will. So imagine, like, that opens you up to so many people. Mm-hmm. Whether you choose to use that, like, and no one will tell you they like bad food. They may think it's good, and they might like Taco Bell, and but to them it may be great. But people eat, and people have favorite things they like to eat, and eating is, every culture eats. Every culture has a dish. Every culture has ingredients that is specific to that culture. And even in cooking, the great thing I love I could learn something about cooking every single day until the day I die, and I will never learn everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that later. I know that, we're at the end here, and I was going to ask you about this earlier.
You can ask. That's not your time. You can ask me.
Is the expectation when you become a chef at a high level, is the expectation is that you speak different languages? And by that, I mean, you don't just stick with French your whole cooking life or your whole chefing life. You don't just don't just go to Tokyo and do the Tokyo thing, but you're expected to be able to be kind of like ambidextrous, like to be able to go into any kitchen anywhere and speak different languages.
To speak different languages is beneficial. Now, I would say this to anyone listening, and especially if you're thinking about getting in this industry, you would be a fool. And I think not even this industry, just Americans in general. And let's get past our own egos. Everyone needs to know how to speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. Period. Mm-hmm. Period. You can track and see just where the projections of this nation is going to go. If you're in the South, for sure, anywhere in the Southeast, Southwest, learn how to speak Spanish. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you have to be great? Do you have to be good? No, and also it's an appreciation to other cultures when you at least have tried to learn the knowledge of their language.
And I should
French and Spanish.
I should correct my question. I didn't ask it well enough too.
Okay.
Because I was also meaning forms of cooking, cooking the French menu, and being able to switch from that to, if I made you go into another place and you had to cook some Italian or you had to do some different things, are you expected to have transferable skills to wherever you go?
Oh, a Daisanian is a Daisanian is a Daisanian. And then wherever, but yes. Now, there's some cuisines for sure that are much less focused. Like, you may not see me at the sushi counter rolling sushi, or at an Indian cuisine restaurant working the tandoori. But there's there's a level of crossover, especially once you reach a certain level. You should definitely be able to have to break down. A chicken is a chicken in whatever restaurant. Like, the anatomy of the chicken is the same. The cow, saute is sauteing. Mm-hmm. Whether you're sauteing green beans in the South, or mushrooms in the French kitchen, or gnocchi in an Italian kitchen, sauteing is sauteing, boiling is boiling. Yes, there is a certain level of crossover. Someone comes to me and they say they have a certain level of experience. Even if you've only worked at McDonald's, at some point, you then have or you know how to fry. Mm-hmm. And frying's frying, mm-hmm. So But no, you are expected to have a certain level of crossover for sure.
Well, I appreciate this conversation so much. This is very interesting just to me because I wonder how people get what they get and how do you make it to being, like to being you. That's why these conversations are so interesting to me, is because you get to see the end product, but it's really a mystery how people get to where they are and what the pathway is. And success doesn't just come. It's not like you didn't get lucky. You didn't get lucky. You may have had some good fortune, but you didn't get lucky. You worked.
Worked and not afraid of taking a chance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I can name you probably like 3 times, and I don't mean to keep us. I can name it almost to you 3 times that I made a choice that I know most people wouldn't have made. And, if you take the most comfortable path, be okay with like your life may be comfortable and a bit mediocre. Are you taking the path that pushes you? And I think often that's a no. People won't choose a path that pushes their limit, that pushes them, that this is going to be tough. I moved to New York City and I told a friend of mine how much I was going to be making an hour. I think at this time it was like a little bit over $10, and they thought I was crazy. He stayed, did not go get the experience, was supposed to come to New York with me. Stayed. That seems too hard. You're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I've done something that the masses have told me they wouldn't do, or it seems too hard, it's crazy, it only led to me being more successful. 1,000% every time, every single time. Hey, you're going to New York? You're crazy. Went to New York, worked at the best restaurants, got the best experience of my life. You going to Luxembourg? Who goes to Luxembourg? That's crazy. Every time. You're moving to Washington, have a very successful restaurant. You're going back to Alabama. New Yorkers told me I was crazy to go back to Alabama and start a pizza restaurant. I have 2. Like, every single time. So, yeah, this is not what you would choose to do, because everyone doesn't choose to go to the gym, but everyone wants to look good. How does that work out?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you on that one, it doesn't work out well.
No, no pun intended. It doesn't work out.
Yeah, I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Chef John Hall, I thank you so much for giving us so much of your time today and being generous with us with your time. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Always Learning, and we are always learning. We hope to catch you on the next episode.